The spring of 1812 arrived in London with all the promise of renewal, soft sunshine filtering through grey skies, carriages rattling across cobblestone streets, and society once again awakening from winter's quiet restraint. For many young women, it was a season of possibility. For her, it would become the season that reshaped her entire understanding of love, dignity, and survival. At 20 years of age, she entered her first full London season as the only daughter of a respectable but unremarkable noble family. Her father held an old title, one that carried history rather than influence, and their estate provided comfort but not extravagance. They were not poor, but they were certainly not powerful. In a society that measured worth by wealth and alliances, that distinction mattered more than kindness or intelligence ever could. She did not enter society with grand illusions. She had been raised sensibly, taught to read widely, to observe carefully, and to value courtesy over attention. Her beauty was quiet rather than striking, dark hair that caught light softly instead of dazzling, eyes thoughtful rather than flirtatious, and a calm demeanor that often went unnoticed beside louder, more dazzling women. She was the sort of young woman people described as pleasant rather than remarkable. And yet, during that spring, something unexpected happened. At one of the early season balls, hosted by a prominent hostess known for gathering London's most eligible gentlemen, she met him. He was everything society admired in a man: handsome, confident, well-born, and perfectly aware of his own charm. As the heir to a powerful family, his presence alone turned heads. When he asked her to dance, it caused more than a few raised brows. When he sought her out again the following evening, tongues began to wag. At first she was cautious. She had seen how quickly admiration could become mockery. But he was persistent in a way that felt deliberate rather than careless. He spoke to her not of fashion or gossip, but of books he had read, of ideas he claimed to admire. He asked her opinions and appeared genuinely interested in her answers. When she spoke, he listened, or at least he seemed to. "You are different," he told her one afternoon, during a quiet visit arranged with proper supervision. "Most ladies concern themselves only with appearances." "You think?" "I admire that." Those words settled into her heart more deeply than she realized at the time. He claimed the first dance at several balls. He arranged carriage rides through Hyde Park. He positioned himself beside her at dinners and theater performances. Slowly, carefully, he made her visible. And with visibility came expectation. Society noticed. Whispers followed her into rooms. Curious glances lingered longer than before. Her mother began to look at her with cautious hope, and her father, though reserved, allowed himself a quiet optimism. No one spoke openly of proposals, but everyone understood the implication. A man of his rank did not pursue a young woman so attentively without purpose. Or so she believed. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped not by necessity, but by choice. She did not dream of title or luxury. She dreamed of companionship, of being valued for her mind, of sharing respect rather than merely duty. She believed, foolishly, that she had been seen. Then everything changed. Her arrival in London was as sudden as it was decisive. The daughter of immense wealth, newly elevated by her father's purchase title, she brought with her what society valued above all else: an enormous fortune. Her beauty was immediate and obvious: golden curls, bright eyes, effortless confidence. She did not need to earn attention. It followed her naturally. Within days the shift began. Where once his eyes sought her across crowded rooms, they now lingered elsewhere. Conversations shortened. Invitations became less frequent. Apologies were offered vaguely. He was busy, distracted, burdened by family obligations. She noticed everything. She noticed how he no longer positioned himself beside her. How he excused himself early. How his laughter grew louder in the presence of another. And still she hoped. She told herself she was imagining things. That she was being unreasonable. Until the night society made the truth impossible to ignore. The ball was one of the grandest of the season. Chandeliers blazed above silk and jewels, and the air hummed with expectation. She arrived knowing something was wrong, though she could not yet name it. The looks she received were different, not curious but pitying. Conversations fell quiet when she approached. And then he came to her. He did not lower his voice. He did not seek privacy. He spoke to her where others could hear. "I hope you will forgive my inattention," he said smoothly. "I have been forced to reconsider certain priorities." She felt the room tilt slightly. "I must be honest," he continued, his tone carefully regretful. "My family requires a match that strengthens our position. Personal inclinations must, at times, yield to duty. I trust you understand." It was not simply rejection. It was dismissal. Public, deliberate, and humiliating. She understood immediately what he was doing. He was ensuring the narrative favored him. That society would see him as honorable and her as unrealistic. That the fault lay not in his betrayal, but in her presumption. "I understand perfectly," she replied, somehow managing to keep her voice steady. "Thank you for your honesty." The words cost her more than anyone present could know. She remained at the ball. She danced. She smiled. She performed dignity so convincingly that many later remarked on her composure. But when she returned home that night, the mask shattered. She wept until dawn. Within weeks, his engagement to the wealthy young woman was announced publicly. Society moved on with cruel efficiency. The whispers shifted from speculation to judgment. She became a cautionary tale, a young woman who had aimed too high and paid the price. Something inside her hardened. She did not withdraw from society. That would have confirmed the narrative. Instead, she returned stronger, quieter, and infinitely more guarded. She learned how to deflect questions without revealing hurt. She learned how to smile without hope. She learned, above all, how dangerous charm could be when unaccompanied by honor. Offers came, eventually. Not flattering ones. Men seeking comfort, management, or convenience. She declined them all. If she were to marry without love, she would at least choose respect. By the time she turned 22, society had begun to label her something far more unforgiving than promising. She was becoming invisible. And she accepted it. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that the wound inflicted during that spring would shape the most important decision of her life. That the humiliation meant to diminish her would instead prepare her to recognize honesty when it finally stood before her. But that was still to come. For now, she carried the lesson learned at great cost. Pretty words were worthless. Public affection meant nothing. And love, if it existed at all, must prove itself through action, or not be trusted at all. 2 years after the humiliation that had quietly altered the course of her life, she returned to London society not as a hopeful young woman, but as someone who understood its rules far too well. She still attended balls. She still accepted invitations. She still danced when asked. But there was a difference now, one that observant eyes noticed even if they could not name it. She no longer looked outward for approval. Her smiles were polite rather than eager, her laughter restrained, her expectations non-existent. She had learned survival. It was during a dinner hosted by a politically influential family that she first encountered him in any meaningful way. He was not introduced with excitement or romantic anticipation. There was no flurry of whispers when he entered the room, no audible intake of breath from young ladies hoping to catch his attention. Instead, there was a subtle straightening of posture, a slight lowering of voices, an instinctive awareness that someone important had arrived. He was a duke. Not a decorative one, nor a youthful heir still learning the weight of responsibility, but a man who had held his title for over a decade. His estate was among the wealthiest in England, his influence substantial, his reputation formidable. He was known for intelligence, discipline, and a complete lack of tolerance for foolishness. He was also known for remaining unmarried. At 32, his bachelorhood was no longer considered romantic. It was considered deliberate. She observed him as she had learned to observe everything, quietly without expectation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair worn simply rather than fashionably. His expression was composed, his movements economical, his presence commanding without theatrics. When he spoke, people listened, not because he demanded attention but because his words carried weight. Their first exchange was brief. She had made an incidental remark during a discussion about agricultural management, referencing something her father's steward had once explained to her. It was not intended to impress anyone. It was simply accurate. The Duke looked at her then. Really looked. An intelligent observation, he said after a moment. Not one often heard in drawing rooms. There was no flirtation in his tone. No charm. Merely acknowledgement. She inclined her head politely and thought nothing more of it. Their second meeting occurred weeks later at the theater, seated in adjacent boxes by chance rather than design. During the interval, he asked her opinion of the performance. She gave it honestly without attempting to please him. Instead of dismissing her response, he questioned her reasoning. A conversation followed, brief, focused, unexpectedly engaging. When it ended, he bowed and returned to his seat. Still she thought nothing of it. It was the third encounter that changed everything. She had been standing near a garden arbor during a summer gathering, enjoying a rare moment of solitude away from the noise of society, when she sensed someone beside her. "Lady," he said, addressing her directly, "may I speak with you candidly?" She turned, surprised but not alarmed. "Of course, Your Grace. I find myself in need of a wife." The words were delivered with the same tone one might use to discuss an estate matter. There was no preamble, no attempt to soften the statement. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I require someone intelligent, composed, and capable," he continued. "Someone who understands duty, discretion, and responsibility. Someone who does not harbor romantic illusions." The air felt strangely still. "I have observed you," he said calmly. "You possess these qualities." There was no compliment hidden in his words. Only assessment. "You are proposing marriage," she said carefully. "I am proposing a practical arrangement," he corrected. "One that would benefit us both." He outlined his expectations with startling clarity. Respect. Civility. Partnership in public. Independence in private. He made no promises of affection, no declarations of admiration. He offered security, autonomy, and honesty. "I will not pretend sentiment where it does not exist," he said. "But I will never deceive you." Her heart beat steadily. Not quickly. Not nervously. Steadily. It was the most honest proposal she had ever witnessed. "I would need time," she said. "Of course. I will call upon your father in 3 days." As he turned to leave, he paused. "I am aware of how you were treated in the past," he added quietly. "I assure you, whatever else our marriage might be, it will never be dishonorable." Those words followed her long after he was gone. She did not accept immediately. She thought carefully. Practically. She consulted her father, who listened more than he spoke. She listened to her mother's excitement without allowing it to influence her decision. She examined her own heart, and found it guarded but clear. She did not believe in romantic love anymore. But she believed in integrity. When she accepted, it was without illusion. The wedding took place 3 days later by special license. There were no crowds, no spectacle, no expectation of romance. He was punctual. Polite. Correct. He kissed her cheek once. And that was that. She became a duchess without drama. 3 days into their marriage, they attended their first major ball together. She had dreaded it. He had insisted. "Society will speak regardless," he said. "Better they speak while seeing us united." She dressed carefully, not extravagantly. He presented her with a set of sapphires, family heirlooms, without ceremony. She wore them without comment. When they entered the ballroom, the effect was immediate. Whispers erupted. A duke married. Abruptly. To her. She felt the weight of attention settle upon her shoulders, but she did not falter. She walked beside her husband, her posture straight, her expression composed. Then she saw him. The man who had humiliated her years ago stood across the room, confident, smiling, accompanied by his wealthy wife. Their eyes met. He smiled. And then, without invitation, he approached. "Lady," he said deliberately, using her former title. "Still attending these events, I see." The words were calculated. The audience intentional. Before she could respond, he continued, his tone falsely sympathetic. "Still unmarried too. At your age, I imagine prospects become limited." The cruelty was precise. She felt it like a blow. And then, without warning, she felt a firm hand settle at her waist. "I believe," her husband said calmly, "you are addressing my wife." The silence was absolute. "My wife," he continued, his voice carrying effortlessly. "The Duchess of Ravencross." The man went pale. Introductions followed, devastating in their politeness. Each word stripped away the illusion of superiority the other man clung to. Her husband did not raise his voice. He did not insult. He simply stated facts. And facts were enough. When they left the confrontation behind, her legs trembled, not from fear but from release. Later that night, as they stood in the quiet of their home, she thanked him. "I meant every word," he said. "You are my wife. I will not permit disrespect." Something shifted. Not love, but trust. And for the first time in years, she slept without reliving the past. For the first weeks of their marriage, nothing about their daily life resembled what society imagined when it spoke of newlyweds. They did not share a bed. They did not linger in each other's company. They did not exchange glances heavy with unspoken promises. They lived instead as two intelligent adults who had chosen stability over illusion. Their household was large, efficient, and quiet. Servants moved with practiced discretion. Meals were taken at consistent hours. Conversations were polite, focused, and free of unnecessary intimacy. She occupied the Duchess's apartments. He remained in his own wing of the house. This arrangement was not cold. It was respectful. Each morning he inquired after her health through his steward. Each evening she ensured his correspondence was delivered promptly. They spoke during meals, about estate matters, social obligations, and public appearances. Nothing more was required. And yet, slowly something began to change. It started with trust. He asked her opinion on matters most men of his rank would never have entrusted to a wife: tenant concerns, charitable distributions, staffing decisions. At first, she responded cautiously, uncertain whether her input was merely symbolic. But when her suggestions were implemented without question, she realized something essential. He valued competence. When she proposed reorganizing a neglected portion of the estate to improve tenant livelihoods, he listened. When she questioned a long-standing but inefficient practice, he investigated rather than dismissing her. He did not praise her extravagantly. He simply acknowledged good judgment when he saw it. For a woman accustomed to being admired only superficially, or dismissed entirely, this respect was transformative. She began to move through the household with confidence rather than hesitation. Servants responded to her authority naturally, sensing her calm competence. She learned the rhythms of the estate, the personalities of its people, and the weight of her new responsibilities. He noticed, not in obvious ways but in subtle adjustments. He consulted her more frequently. He ensured she was present during discussions with stewards. He introduced her not merely as his wife, but as his partner in management. "You need not attend if you prefer rest," he said once before a particularly long meeting. "I prefer to attend," she replied. He nodded, and made space for her. Their conversations lengthened gradually. What began as exchanges of necessity evolved into discussions of philosophy, governance, and personal values. They discovered a shared preference for honesty over charm, for substance over spectacle. They disagreed at times, quietly, respectfully, but always with the assurance that disagreement did not threaten their standing. She felt safe expressing her thoughts. That safety was new. It was during a visit to one of the more remote villages on the estate that she first saw a different side of him. A tenant family had lost their home to a fire. The matter was reported clinically without urgency. Losses were recorded. Compensation discussed. Procedure followed. But when he visited the site himself, he did not remain distant. He listened to the family. He ensured temporary shelter was provided immediately. He authorized rebuilding without hesitation. "You did not have to come in person," she said later, as they rode back together. "I did," he replied simply. "Power should be seen when it matters." She looked at him then, not as a duke, not as a husband of convenience, but as a man whose sense of responsibility extended beyond himself. Something softened inside her. That night, she found herself awake long after retiring, considering thoughts she had not permitted herself in years. She did not label them. She did not indulge them. She simply acknowledged their existence. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. Autumn deepened into winter. They attended social events together when necessary, always united, always composed. Society's curiosity gradually gave way to acceptance. Their marriage was not romantic, but it was respected. And then, unexpectedly, vulnerability entered the space between them. It happened one evening after a formal dinner, when the household had quieted and the fire burned low in the drawing room. They had lingered longer than usual, discussing a letter he had received from Parliament. "You find these matters burdensome," she observed gently. He considered her words before answering. "They are necessary," he said. "But yes, they are burdensome." The admission was small, but genuine. Encouraged, she spoke of her own experiences. Of navigating society after humiliation. Of learning restraint not from nature but from necessity. She did not dramatize her past. She did not seek sympathy. She simply spoke the truth. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he said quietly, "You were treated unjustly." The words were understated. But their weight was immense. She met his gaze. For the first time she did not look away. "Thank you," she said. Something unspoken passed between them, not desire, not love, but understanding. From that evening onward their distance narrowed, not physically but emotionally. They shared tea more often. Walked together through the estate. Spoke not just of responsibilities but of memories, regrets, and aspirations. She learned that his bachelorhood had not been born of arrogance or indifference, but caution. He had seen marriages destroy capable women and weaken good men. He had chosen solitude rather than compromise. "And yet," she said once lightly, "you compromised." "I chose," he corrected. "There is a difference." Winter came. Snow softened the estate into quiet stillness. One evening she fell ill, nothing serious but enough to confine her to bed. He visited her room himself, carrying a book she had mentioned wanting to read. "I thought you might appreciate distraction," he said. She smiled, a genuine one. "You are thoughtful, Your Grace." He hesitated. "When we are alone," he said carefully, "you may call me by my name." The invitation was intimate in a way nothing else had been. Time continued its patient work. By spring, the question neither of them voiced had become impossible to ignore. Their arrangement had shifted. They were no longer merely respectful allies. They were companions, confidants. Still neither rushed. It was she who spoke first. "One day," she said during a quiet walk beneath blossoming trees, "we will need to address what our marriage is becoming." He did not pretend misunderstanding. "Yes," he said. "We will." "Do you regret choosing me?" she asked, not as a test but as a genuine question. He stopped walking. "No," he said without hesitation. "Do you regret choosing me?" She considered carefully. "No." Silence followed, but it was comfortable. That night, when he asked if she wished to share his bed, it was not assumed. It was offered. She accepted, not with fear, not with fantasy, but with trust. Their intimacy was gentle, considerate, unrushed. It was built not on passion alone, but on years of restraint finally eased. Afterward they did not retreat. They remained together, speaking softly, learning each other without urgency. Love did not arrive as a thunderbolt. It arrived quietly, in shared mornings, in mutual decisions, in unspoken understanding. By the time society realized the depth of their bond, it was already unshakable. The man who had once humiliated her faded into irrelevance. His cruelty no longer defined her. Her past no longer controlled her choices. She had not married for love. But she had built it, carefully, honestly, and without illusion. And in doing so, she found something far stronger than romance. She found belonging.